In 2025, India's economy was a real puzzle. On one hand, you had this incredible story of domestic success, a fortress, really, of stability and growth. But on the other hand, that very same fortress found itself under this relentless siege from all sorts of international pressures. This is the story of how one of the world's fastest-growing economies had to navigate a perfect storm. So you have to ask yourself, how is that even possible? How can one economy be living what economists call a Goldilocks stream? That perfect spot of high growth and super low inflation, while at the exact same time getting slammed by a storm of external shocks? It's a wild paradox, right? A tale of two completely different economic realities happening at once. Let's break down how India got here. Okay, so first, let's step inside the fortress. To really get the threat of the siege, you have to appreciate just how strong the walls were. And in 2025, India's domestic economy was an absolute powerhouse. The number that just blew everyone away was this, a stunning 8.2% GDP growth in the second quarter. Now, this wasn't just good, it was a six-quarter high. It totally smashed market estimates and really cemented India's position as the fastest-growing major economy in the world, even while global growth was kind of slowing down. But here's the crazy part. This explosive growth didn't come with the usual problem of high prices. Nope, actually, the opposite happened. Retail inflation tanked to just 0.25% in October, which is a historic low. This is the exact combination economists dream about: soaring growth and stable prices. The perfect Goldilocks scenario. And that price stability? Well, it had a massive payoff. It gave the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank, all the confidence it needed to slash interest rates by a total of 1.25% over the year. That move made borrowing cheaper for everybody, from businesses to consumers, and just added more fuel to that economic engine. And it wasn't just the central bank. Government policy was also pouring fuel on the fire. You had major reforms like GST 2.0, which simplified the whole tax system, and then this huge income tax relief that put more money directly into people's pockets. So with goods from cars to farm equipment getting cheaper, domestic consumption was just firing on all cylinders. But while everything inside the fortress was thriving, a really powerful storm was brewing just outside its walls. The international picture in 2025 was just getting darker and darker by the month. The siege kicked off for real in August. The Trump administration launched a trade assault, first hitting Indian goods with a 25% tariff. But then, just a few weeks later, it doubled down, cranking them up to 50% and adding what it called a penalty over India's energy relationship with Russia. And look, this wasn't just some dry policy debate. The trade war was being fought with words, too. The rhetoric coming out of the White House was incredibly blunt. This quote from July really captures the aggressive tone that was setting the stage for everything that came next. The impact was immediate, and it hit the currency markets hard. The Indian rupee just tumbled, going from around 85 to the dollar to a record low of nearly 91 by December. Now, this didn't just make imports more expensive, it sent this wave of uncertainty through the entire financial system. A weak currency, well, that spooks foreign investors, and it triggered a historic exodus of cash. In total, they pulled a staggering 1.58 lakh crore rupees, that's over 17 billion US dollars, out of Indian markets. It was the single worst year ever recorded for foreign investment flows. The fortress was definitely starting to feel the pressure. Now, this siege from the outside didn't just rattle the markets. It reached right to the very top of India's corporate world, what some people call the billionaire Raj. And it hit its most powerful players in completely different ways, revealing two very different strategies for dealing with the heat from Washington. First, in a move that sent absolute shockwaves through the business world, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed a federal indictment against the industrialist Gautam Adani. The charges were incredibly serious: a massive scheme involving bribery and fraud to lock down energy contracts. This was a direct shot at one of India's biggest conglomerates. But at the same time, India's other corporate titan, Mukesh Ambani, took a completely different path. Instead of facing legal battles, he got into personal diplomacy, using a close, long-standing relationship with the Trump family to get a seat at a state dinner with the president himself. Two tycoons, two very different fates. So with all this pressure mounting from trade, finance, and even the legal system, India couldn't just stick to the old playbook. No way. It had to get creative and deploy an unconventional multi-front defense to protect its interests. Officially, the government went on a diplomatic offensive. Facing tariffs from its biggest trading partner, India hit the accelerator on diversifying its trade, quickly closing new free trade deals with countries like New Zealand and Oman, while pushing hard on agreements with the UK and Israel. But that was just the public face of it. The real fight wasn't just happening in formal diplomatic meetings. Behind the scenes, in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., India dramatically ramped up its spending on lobbying to try and influence American policy directly. And you better believe this spending was strategic. The contracts went to firms with deep, direct connections to the Trump administration. We're talking about firms led by former campaign directors and presidential advisors, people hired specifically for who they knew and the access they had. But here's where things get really fascinating. This whole complex defense strategy, it wasn't just being run out of New Delhi anymore. A new and really powerful layer of Indian diplomacy had started to emerge, coming right from its own states. It's a concept that scholars call para-diplomacy. It sounds a bit academic, but what it really means is simple. State governments, not just the central one, are becoming players on the world stage. Now, for a country like India, which has always had a very centralized foreign policy, this is a revolutionary shift. It's decentralizing power in a way we just haven't seen before. And let me be clear, this isn't just a theory from a textbook. It's a real shift that's happening on the ground, creating a much more complex map of Indian foreign policy with a whole bunch of new players on the field. So what does that actually look like? Well, we're now seeing state chief ministers leading their own high-profile delegations overseas, sometimes even paving the way for the prime minister's own visits. They're also joining the PM on critical foreign trips, especially when their own state's regional interests are on the table. All of this brings us to the critical question for India's future, doesn't it? As its strong fortress economy faces this relentless siege from the outside. And with everyone from billionaires to state chief ministers now joining the fight, will this complex, multi-layered, and pretty unconventional defense be enough to secure its economic future? The battle of 2025 has definitely set the stage for a whole new era of challenges.